The first time I touched Kenzo Arai, his sleeve was burning and I did not know his name. The second time, he was my husband, and he still did not know mine. Some debts are never paid in money. Some come due 12 years late, in one room, in front of everyone. My name is Amara. I was the maid. They say a Japanese mafia boss married a servant to humiliate a rival family. That part is true. He did. He stood in a room full of dangerous men. He chose the woman who took their coats at the door. He did it for revenge. He told me so himself. 1 year of marriage. Then a quiet divorce, well paid. I said yes. I had my own reasons. I had my scars. Stay with me tonight. Because you will watch a woman bow to me on a floor she once ordered me to scrub. You will hear the 8 words my husband said in front of 11 witnesses. Before we get into it, tap subscribe. It is free, and it helps this channel more than you know. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight. I read every one of them. You will also learn who lied to that man for 12 years, and what the lie finally cost her. Now let me take you up the hill. The Arai house sat above the water in Yokohama. 31 rooms, 4 gardens, a gate that cost more than the whole street I grew up on. I ran that house for 6 years. I knew which rooms held damp in March. I knew the old man's medicine schedule better than his doctor did. I could tell you who was coming up the drive by the sound of the gravel. Heavy tires meant business. Slow tires meant trouble. I knew that Kenzo Arai took his tea too hot. He drank it that way because his father had. Nobody ever thanked me for any of it. You do not thank the walls. And every August, in that wet heat, I wore long white gloves to the elbow. That was Sachiko's rule. Sachiko Arai was the old man's second wife. She was not Kenzo's mother. She wanted you to forget that, and she wanted you to remember it, depending on the room. She made the glove rule my first month. She never said the word scars. She said guests should not have to look at something unpleasant while they eat. That is the sentence. 12 words. I wore those gloves for 6 years while I carried her tea. Hold on to that detail. It comes back. Because a night is coming when a man takes those gloves off my hands in front of 40 people. And nobody in that room breathes. Then came the march that changed everything. The old man died in his sleep. The house went quiet in a way I had never heard. Kenzo came home from Osaka. He was 31. He was suddenly the head of everything his father had built, and the Hoshino family arrived within the week. They came smiling. They brought gifts. They brought their daughter, Mika Hoshino, in a car that had to be washed twice on the drive up. They wanted the marriage. 2 houses, 1 name, no more trouble. Everybody in that kitchen knew the arrangement before Kenzo did. What they did not know was this. Kenzo Arai had spent 12 years quietly learning who had set the fire that nearly ended him. I will get to that fire. Stay with me. Sachiko wanted the Hoshino match badly. She had her own reasons. Money was the smallest of them. And she had one more reason, which you will hear before the end. It is the reason she could never let that woman anywhere near her stepson's memory. 3 days after the funeral, I dropped a teacup. That is all it was. A cup. It slipped off a tray because my hands were shaking from 11 hours on my feet. Sachiko slapped me. Not hard. That was the worst part. It was casual, the way you swat at something in the air. Then she told me to pick up the pieces with my bare hands, since I was so careless with the gloves. The house manager stood in the doorway. He looked at the ceiling. He remembered urgent business in the West Wing, and he was gone before the pieces stopped moving. That is how a house like that works. There is always a man with rank who suddenly has paperwork. So I knelt. I picked up the pieces. I did not cry. I stopped doing that at 15, and I did not know that Kenzo Arai was standing in the hall. 2 weeks later, he asked me to marry him. He did it badly. He was a man trained to give orders, not to ask questions. We were in the garden. It was raining. He had not brought an umbrella, because he never brought one. He said the Hoshino family expected an answer at the memorial dinner. He said he would give them one. He said he would not marry Mika Hoshino if the sky fell in. Then he told me the truth, which I respected him for. He said, "This is not a kindness. I am using you to insult them." I said, "I know." He said, 1 year. A settlement. No obligations of any kind. He told me I could keep my own name in private. And then he said the part he did not have to say. He said, "You will never wear those gloves in my house again." Understand something about me. I was 33 years old. I had been invisible in that house for 6 years, and in other houses before it. I did not say yes because I was in love. I said yes because he had noticed the gloves. The engagement lasted 5 weeks. They were the strangest 5 weeks of my life. Rio came around more. Rio was Kenzo's second, a wide, quiet man who had been with the family since he was 19. He had a missing fingertip and an unbelievable sweet tooth. The first week Rio called me Amara-san. Sachiko corrected him in front of everybody. The second week, Rio said it again, louder, and he looked straight at Sachiko while he did it. Small things. That is all loyalty is, most days. Kenzo started leaving the garden door open in the evenings. I had once said I liked the sound of rain on the stones. He never mentioned it. He just opened the door and went back to his papers. One night I found him asleep at his desk. The tea beside him had gone cold. I put a blanket over him, and his hand came up and held my wrist for 1 second before he let go. Neither of us ever spoke about that. If you have ever been the one who is useful and never the one who is wanted, you know what that second felt like. I carried it around for days. But I noticed something. He stopped drinking his tea scalding hot. He waited for it, the way I did. Meanwhile, across the city, the Hoshino family was told there would be no engagement. I am told Mika Hoshino laughed when she heard who I was. I am told her father did not. Sachiko came to my room that same night. She sat on my bed like we were friends. She said, "You do know he is only doing this to shame them." I said, "Yes," she said. "Then you know it ends." And then she said the sentence I have never forgotten. She said, "Girls like you are borrowed, never kept." I said nothing. Silence costs less than an argument you cannot win, but I remembered it. Hold on to that one too. The wedding was small. It was not warm. 11 of them in the main room, on the good tatami, under a photograph of a dead man. Rio cried, which nobody expected. Sachiko wore gray, which everybody understood. Kenzo held my hand through the whole ceremony. His palm was damp. I found that oddly comforting. A dangerous man, nervous. There is a kind of honesty in that. And that night, everything I had built out of silence came apart in about 4 seconds. I did not undress in front of him. That was never the arrangement. He had his room. I had mine. But I reached past him for the light. My sleeve fell back. He saw my arm. He went very still. The burns run from my right wrist to my shoulder. They spread across my back like something poured. They are 12 years old. They do not fade. He did not look away. That is the part that undid me. Everyone looks away. Your own family looks away. Doctors look away. He looked. And then he did the thing nobody had done in 12 years. He reached out and put 2 fingers against the worst of it, gently, the way you touch something that still hurts. He said, "How old were you?" I said 15. He said where, and I told him. I said a house fire in Kobe, a long time ago. He stood up. His hands were shaking. I had never seen his hands shake, not once in 6 years. He said, say it again. I said it was a long time ago. He said no, the other thing, the thing you said in the hallway. The room went cold. Because I understood what he was asking, and I understood that he had understood first. You need to know what happened in Kobe. 12 years ago, the Arai family kept a second house there. I worked in the kitchen. I was 15. I had no papers worth anything, and I slept in a room the size of a car. The fire started at 2 in the morning, in the east wing. Everyone got out, everyone except a boy of 19 who had come down for the summer. He was pinned in a hallway under a beam that had come through the ceiling. I went back in for him. I do not have a good reason. I have never had one. The men paid to protect that family were standing in the driveway shouting into phones. He was screaming. Then he stopped screaming, which was worse. His sleeve was burning. I put it out with my hands. I could not lift the beam. I could drag him. So I dragged him 20 feet down a burning hallway. The whole way he kept saying he was going to die there. And I kept saying the same 3 words back to him. I said, not today, sir. I got him to the garden door. Men took him from me. Somebody screamed about my back. I woke up 9 days later in a clinic outside the city. Sachiko Arai was sitting beside the bed with an envelope. She told me the boy had lived. She told me the family thanked me. Then she told me that a girl with no papers found inside a burning house like that one would be a problem for everybody, including me. She gave me the envelope. She gave me a train ticket. She told me never to contact the family again. I was 15. I took the ticket. And here is the part that took me 12 years to learn. She told him I died. She told Kenzo Arai that the girl who pulled him out of that hallway never made it to the driveway. She let him carry that for 12 years. She let him look for a grave that did not exist. Then, 6 years ago, a tall woman with burned arms applied for a housekeeping position in Yokohama. Sachiko Arai recognized me instantly. She hired me anyway. She put me in gloves. She put me in the back of the house. And she counted on one thing. A man never really looks at the woman who brings his tea. So on our wedding night, my husband asked me to say the other thing. And I said, not today, sir. He sat down on the floor. A grown man, the head of a house that half of Yokohama feared, sat down with his back against the bed and put his hands over his face. He said, I have been looking for you since I was 19. I said, I know. I read the notices. He said, you read them. I said, for 12 years. Then he asked me the only question that mattered. He asked why I never came. I told him the truth. I said, because I was told you would not want to see what saving you did to my arms. That was the last night Sachiko Arai slept in that house as anything but a guest. But he did not put her out that night. He waited. I asked him why. He said, because you were made small in front of people. So it will be corrected in front of people. 10 years in service teaches you how these houses settle scores. I thought I knew what was coming. I did not. 10 days later came the memorial dinner. It had been arranged for months. The whole house on the good tatami. 41 people. The Hoshino family in the second row, because the seating was a message. Mika Hoshino in white, which was a message back, and Sachiko Arai at the front, where a widow sits. Kenzo stood up to speak about his father. He talked for 2 minutes. It was ordinary, and everybody relaxed. Then he said, before we eat, my wife is owed something. The room went silent. He walked down to where I sat. He knelt in front of me, on that floor, in that suit. He took my hands, and he took my gloves off. He rolled my right sleeve to the shoulder. He turned my arm so the whole room could see what 12 years had left there. Nobody breathed. Then he said the 8 words I promised you. He said this is where my life was carried out. And he told them. All of it. The hallway, the beam, the 15-year-old kitchen girl, the envelope, the train ticket, the lie. He turned to Sachiko. He said, "Stand up." She said his name. She said it the way she used to say mine. He said, "You told me she was gone. You watched me look for her grave. Then you hired her and put her in gloves." Sachiko Arai bowed. She went down onto that floor. The same floor she had ordered me to clean on my knees 3 days after her husband's funeral. And she held the bow. 10 seconds, 15. Nobody told her to stop, so she could not stop. I have never wanted anyone to suffer. But I will not lie to you about that moment. I watched. Rio stepped forward with a small case of papers. Her allowance ended that night. The Kobe house was signed over to me. She was given a car, a driver, and until morning. She was not touched. Not one hand was laid on her. In that world, being untouched and having nothing is the loudest thing that can happen to you. And the Hoshino family sat in the second row and finally understood. The marriage they had been laughing about for 5 weeks was not an insult at all. It was a debt being paid. Mika Hoshino was the first to bow to me. I will always respect her for that. Then my husband turned back to the room and said one more thing. He said, "You will address her as the lady of this house. Girls like you are borrowed, never kept." I thought about that sentence while 41 people bowed to my burned arms. We stayed married. The year came and went, and nobody mentioned it. He never asked me to cover them again. And I never did, not at dinners, not in summer, not once. He still takes his tea too hot. He still forgets umbrellas. He still leaves the garden door open when it rains, and he still will not admit that is what he is doing. Here is what I learned. Then I will let you go. Being seen is not the same as being looked at. People looked at me for 12 years. They saw a uniform, a pair of hands, a girl with something wrong on her arms. Scars are not the record of what was done to you. They are the record of what you were willing to do. Mine took me 12 years to stop hiding. Then they sat me at the head of the table. If you made it this far, tell me one thing in the comments. Tell me the exact moment you stopped scrolling. Was it the teacup, the wedding night, or the bow? And if you know someone who has spent years being the invisible one in a room, send this to them tonight. They need to hear how this one ends.